So here's Uwe Boll.
Oh, we're going there, are we?
Of course!
Oh, for f***'s sake.
Wait, what?
That saved us a lot of time.
What the hell is going on?
They fought for the freedom of Middle-earth.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, it gets worse.
And basically my message is f*** yourself.
F*** you.
I have enough money to play golf till I'm dead.
I don't care. I don't care.
You're easier giving $600,000 if you make a movie about some retarded wizard in the forest.
So you have chosen death.
Emotional damage!
Hey, how are you crazy bastards doing? It's your anti-tuckware Dragon Bro, and today we're diving straight into hell's trash bin in a journey to find out which one of Uwe Boll's movies is the worst one of them all. So strap in, because this is gonna possibly be a long review where you might see me lose my sanity at certain points. Also, I need to ask you guys to at least watch half of this video and to comment down below what you thought of this movie once you've watched the video, because I know I'm not the only one who was exposed to this dumpster fire.
Do it.
With that out of the way, let's jump straight into this wild ride, shall we?
You're a bad man. You're scraping at the door. Scraping at the door.
Oh boy.
That's f***ed up.
I just want to tell you both good luck. We're all counting on you.
So, we begin with Ray Liotta playing a medieval sorcerer mobster archetype called Galleon. Yes, you heard that name right, and no, it isn't a liquefied fusion of Gatorade and Valium, but instead a film director's failed attempt at trying to make his evil wizard archetype sound edgy in order to acquire some street cred from the fantasy nerds of the early 2000s in the hopes that they will go see this movie.
Not a great plan.
Going back to the plot, Galleon is secretly draining the Magus' daughter of her power and tries to keep his little fling with her a secret from the king and her dad because he obviously doesn't want anyone finding out what his true objective is, but like clockwork, Gandalf shows up in Isengard to find out about Saruman's treachery to the kingdom of Rohan by siding with dark creatures and goes out to warn the kingdom of this impending danger. Wait, that's from Fellowship of the Ring. How did I mix that up? Right, so what actually happens is that John Rhys Davies, playing the mage advisor to the king called Merrick, or Magus, finds out about Galleon's betrayal and treachery against the kingdom of Ebb by creating a large army of diet orcs called the Krug with his magic in order to destroy the kingdom, and he runs off to warn the king of this dangerous situation.
It's the same thing.
We then cut to Jason Statham playing a medieval version of his Expendables character called Farmer, who farms. I mean, it can't get any more basic than that. And then we get to meet Ron Perlman devoting 20% of his acting energies to play an old man called Norik, who is a friend of Farmer's family that's frustrated at the young man's lack of social interactions. And look, I'm sorry, but I need to make a disclaimer real quick that I actually played the original Dungeon Siege when I was a kid in the early 2000s, and nowhere in my memory banks do I remember the game having anything remotely close to an actual story, because it was more of an afterthought in order to give gamers a simple excuse to beat the shit out of everything that moved. So now that you've been warned about this fact, let's try to figure out what kind of plot we're walking into. So, we get a filler scene that lets us know that Farmer loves his family a lot, and then we skip to another scene where the king, played by a very jaded Burt Reynolds, gets notified by his soldiers of the rising Krug threat, and... wait, is that who I think it is?
Zoinks! Them peppers is like hot.
Because the more you know.
Okay, with that shocking revelation out of the way, we return to Farmer doing medieval manly house chores until he hears an unusual noise, and wouldn't you know it, a Krug is able to flash step behind Farmer and whack him down with his big club without him being able to notice, but these Krug bastards made a big mistake of trying to attack him because now the spirit of Jason Statham has possessed him, and Farmer proceeds to slaughter all these Krug motherfuckers. The same masterful grace of a sword master with decades of experience, and no, you will never get explained why he's so awesome, because Uwe Boll was ahead of the game back then by making his character a Statham Sue. So you know what, Disney?
Suck it!
Anyway, to make this long sequence short, Farmer and Norik fight their way through the hordes of Krug and Diet Nazgul, impeding them from reaching his wife and son. The Duke informs Black Commander Teresh, that he needs to assemble his army because the Krug are attacking the kingdom. Farmer has a short mini-boss fight with one of Galleon's Diet Nazgul and kills it. The Krug kidnap many people in the village. Galleon kills off Farmer's in-laws while kidnapping his wife, and just to rub some salt in the wound, Galleon kills off Farmer's son as well because Uwe Boll really needs to let you know that this man is Diet Sauron.
Holy Wow, that's dark.
Now that's what I call a curveball.
Moving on, Farmer buries his son, and just like the 80s movies, the Imperial Army arrives too late to be of any help, and when the king asks the people to conscript in his war against the Krug, Farmer just tells him in medieval speak to off with his request because the army didn't do jack squat in protecting their citizens. But then he, Norik, and his brother-in-law end up going out on a journey in order to rescue his wife and the captured villagers from the Krug. However, before that happens, Merrick decides to be an asshole by telling Farmer to rethink his priorities in saving his wife by aiding the king in destroying the threat Galleon is becoming. And just like before, he tells him to as well, because the only thing he cares about is saving his wife because he wasn't able to do the same thing for his dead son.
You're goddamn right.
Now, as serious and deep as that whole conversation was, Uwe Boll thinks that maybe the tone of this film is getting way too dark, so as a result, we get a light-hearted comedic section where Farmer turns into a freaking Spider-Man and crosses a rope bridge easily, but then Farmer's brother-in-law and Norik, being the goofballs that they are, think it's a good idea to zipline through the bridge at the same time, and what ends up happening is that they hilariously bump into each other and fall down to a scene certain death in the riverbank below. But don't worry, people, because both men are completely fine.
What?
Going back to the palace for a bit, we see the Duke conspiring with Galleon to overthrow the king, and then sometime later the king returns to find his palace in a very deplorable state, and who would have known that the man who caused this problem is none other than the Duke himself.
Oh, come on!
After the king reprimands the Duke severely while in a jaded Burt Reynolds state, Commander Teresh kicks him out of the throne room in order to trash talk the Duke about being unfit for the crown. But before I move on, are any of you reminded of something familiar here?
Unless the king specifically orders it, you cannot touch me.
Your orders mean nothing.
This order does not come from me. It comes from the king. We signed it this morning.
What the fuck?
After being embarrassed by both men, the Duke goes on a childish temper tantrum and demands Galleon speed things up on his end in order to get rid of the king, and the evil mage angrily obliges. A little bit later, we see that Merrick's daughter finds out about Galleon's treachery, and before she can do anything, he just decides to vanish abruptly because we need to be reminded again that he's quite the jack. But also that the Duke is very evil because he's sucking up to the king in order to make him lower his guard around him.
It's okay. We know.
To get back on track of the main plot we don't care about anymore, Farmer and his two goofball companions end up falling for a magic rope trap and end up getting questioned by dryads as to why they're wandering around in their forest, and instead of just cooperating with these women, Farmer decides to be a dickhead by doing this instead.
Let us down.
Nigga!
That's cap. I accuse you of capping.
Flabbergasted by the idiotic sight they just witnessed, the Dryads decide they want nothing to do with this insane farmer who defies physics and guide him and his companions outside the forest. Meanwhile, Merrick's daughter tries to inform the king the gravity of the situation again, and also says that she wants to be involved in the protection of the kingdom, but the king says that a woman shouldn't worry her father by meddling in the affairs of men, which then leads to her saying that she doesn't want to follow her father's will of staying locked inside a castle for the rest of her life while the men are going out fighting a war where the existence of the kingdom is at stake.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
You shall live to see these days renewed. No more despair.
Oh, hell no.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Alright, I've nitpicked a lot so far, so I'll hold back until we get to the juicy ripoffs, okay?
No promises.
Moving on, the king ends up getting sick with something that causes him to faint, and according to the movie, it was the poison that the Duke idiotically ate as well from a fruit plate in the previous scene they were both in, and as Merrick is placing his hands on the king to find out if he can cure him, he is informed by Commander Teresh that the Duke took 2 full legions with him in order to fight alongside the Krug, and then Merrick tells Teresh that Galleon is the one responsible for promoting this betrayal.
I already know.
Jumping back to the country hick farmer trio, they end up getting escorted out by the Dryads to the edge of the forest where they conveniently stumble on the Krug transporting Merry and Pippin, I mean his wife and the other villagers, and then the trio come up with an extraction plan to rescue as many of their people as they can, but the second the Dryad lady they end up getting instantaneously attacked by the Krug, and after they dispatch them, Frodo and Sam, I mean the country hick trio, decide to dress themselves up as Krug in order to save his wife, but unfortunately for them, the Krug can clearly tell the difference between their ugly-ass brethren and humans, so they end up capturing Norik and his brother-in-law for being absolute idiots.
You fucking donut.
Also, Farmer gets knocked down by the Diet Nazgul for snooping around, and then Galleon thinks it'll be very productive to get information out of him by slowly hanging him because he can't figure out who he truly is, and in his frustration decides to kill him, but this Diet Nazgul forgot this farmer is possessed by Jason Statham, so of course this ends up happening.
Some riddles aren't worth solving.
No, you're not serious.
How does that work?
Going back to the king and his posse, Jesus Christ, I forgot how many times this film jumps back and forth between these two plot points. The king decides his best bet is to take whatever few legions he has and go confront the Duke and his Krug allies head on, but then Merrick decides to break off from the group in order to save Farmer from near death because he felt a disturbance in the force. But then we get a scene where Farmer's brother-in-law tells his wife the terrible news that her son has died, and while I know that this is supposed to be a dramatic scene, I can't help but laugh at how long she kept her mouth wide open in shock, like as if the actress completely forgot that she can't laugh at the writing of this movie.
Help me! Help me!
Anyway, to speed up a bit, Merrick brings Farmer to the king and tells both of them that Farmer is this film's budget Aragorn by giving off the bombshell that he is the king's long-lost son, but the way Merrick determines this is by saying that he recognized Norik from way back in the beginning of the movie as someone who tended the queen's horses, and that during a massacre 30 years ago that we won't get any context on, he saved a young farmer and raised him in Stonebridge as a farmer, and I swear that I didn't leave anything essential out.
Really? Really?
What a load of shit.
Now that our brains have been thoroughly melted, let's skip ahead to what I like to call the most blatant battle scene ripoff in this movie, where the legions face off against the Krug, and my god, it's incredible just how obvious it is. Now, if you thought that the goofy bit I showed off in the intro of this video was me overdoing it too much, how about I show you a side-by-side comparison of both scenes with their original audio, and you tell me if I'm reaching too much, huh?
I'm just messing with you.
What? What the f?
Okay, you know what?
I don't even care anymore.
Regardless, after 11 minutes of just pure fighting where Farmer flies, kicks, and slashes away at enemies like he's a protagonist in an isekai anime, he ends up encountering one of the dyed Nazguls and cuts this one's head off as well. Some ninjas do a synced slashing move that makes all cheesy Chinese martial arts movies look great by comparison. The Duke mortally wounds the king with an arrow, and a few minutes later he attempts to escape but ends up getting captured by Merrick's daughter with the Dryad's help because he's such an idiot that he thought the best thing he could do right now is try to kill this woman while fleeing from a losing battle.
You idiot!
In the aftermath, Farmer gets a pep talk from the dying king about how he must set aside the ranger and become the king of Gondor. Fuck, it slipped off again. I meant to say that the king told him that he has to abandon his notions about being a farmer and take up the mantle of kingship that is his birthright in order to save the Empire of Ebb.
Jesus Christ! Really?
Regardless, the Duke gets humiliated by Commander Terrace and almost gets killed by him as punishment, but is instead sent to prison, I guess, to later pay for his crimes, but, well, we never get told in the movie what happens to him afterwards, they just kinda imply it, I assume. Also, to make this section shorter, a plan to invade Mordor, I mean Galleon's domain, is created by Farmer and Merrick that consist of them in a small elite unit infiltrating the castle to directly dispatch Galleon while his main army of Krug is distracted by the remaining legions of Ebb fighting them in their home turf, and I'm sure you already know where I'm going with this.
Certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for?
Oh man, I almost forgot to tell you guys what happened to Norik, and all I can say is that he died in a quick cutaway scene while the forest battle was going on in a futile attempt to escape with the prisoners. However, everyone gets recaptured by the Krug and put back to work in the mines, and then Galleon finds out who Farmer truly is and tells his wife he'll kill her after he deals with Farmer, while the wife gives him the snarky comeback comment of, "I like to see you try, bitch."
That was childish, man.
Now, before we get into the final battle, I would greatly appreciate if you guys could do what you're seeing on screen right now so that the YouTube algorithm can see that I'm not insane in mentioning the fact that Uwe Boll films are insanely terrible, and so that you can do your civic duty of getting the video exposed to more people out there in order to make sure they don't end up accidentally watching this garbage film.
Fun and good for your health.
Anyway, the final confrontation takes place in a very rainy and muddy hill for some reason, where the bumbling idiot Krug end up fighting the legions, and meanwhile Merrick decides to directly confront Galleon by himself in order to see if he can convince him to repent of his ways, and as they're talking for several minutes, we get a very long and boring fight scene where both men are just walking around as magic swords are doing all the work for them in trying to kill the other mage. But eventually Merrick decides this bullshit fight has gone on for long enough, so he decides to call the match a draw, but that sore loser Galleon doesn't like that call, so he decides to kill Merrick through cheating by using the sword fragments Merrick broke off with his sword and turning them all into a small dust cloud that he then magically shoves through the old man's chest.
Bullshit, man!
Can he do that?
He did.
No, whatever, man. Whatever.
Now that we've been exposed to way too much BS, Farmer finally makes it into the castle. His brother-in-law starts a rebellion in the slave pens with the captured villagers against the Krug. Galleon psychically guides Farmer into his inner chamber, and they end up fighting for several minutes with probably some of the worst sword fighting choreography I have ever seen in my life. I mean, the Rings of Power sword fighting choreography with Mary Sue Galadriel is still the undisputed king of bad sword choreography, but this movie earns a seat at the table in second place in my opinion. Jesus Christ, this movie really sucks.
I've seen enough. Shut it down.
Look, the last 2 minutes of this movie is just Farmer somehow getting tied up by a bookstorm Galleon conjured up. He monologues for way too long about what kind of vengeance Farmer is seeking. Merrick's mostly useless mage daughter comes in to stop Galleon from killing him at the last second and faints a few seconds later. farmer's wife somehow recovered of her concussion from being thrown hard into a column earlier, but is somehow able to stab the wizard in the back. The dramatic music is playing because all the good guys are about to die, and then Farmer picks up his sword and slices the wizard's throat, ending the thread once and for all, but still having enough screen time to show us a scene of he and his wife smooching before Uwe Boll decides to pull the plug because he knows that no one will actually watch this movie because it's so terrible.
Well, except for me.
Look guys, my rating for this movie is a 3 out of 10, and it's because this is just one of those lazy fantasy movie adaptations that barely tries to do anything original to draw in the viewer and relies too much on ridiculously expensive set battle pieces and top talent in order to hide the fact that the ice cream they're serving you is actually a big steaming turd with sprinkles.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
I personally wouldn't send this movie to my worst enemy because they would end up falling asleep out of boredom due to the ridiculously slow pacing, the huge focus on forgetful characters, and the fact that the plot is literally your generic fantasy video game story of the evil sorcerer threatens to destroy the kingdom, but the adventurer from humble beginnings will slay him because he's special for whatever reason and restore peace to the land. Boring! Now, while I hope I was able to entertain you throughout this review, I sincerely must admit that watching this movie as a viewer gave me PTSD flashbacks of watching Rings of Power, and that's why I said in the video title that this movie makes that show look like a masterpiece considering how terrible it is. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, but now I will need to excuse myself because I need to return to the psych ward after watching this film. So until then, Namaria folks.